Hello, my name is Lynn, and for most of my life, my parents called me the hopeless one. They bragged about my brother, praised him in front of everyone, while pretending I was invisible. They even threw a party at a vineyard, laughing behind my back, never realizing the vineyard belonged to me. But worse than the insults was the quiet betrayal. The years they drained my trust, my savings, my heart. How far would family go to tear you down, just because they never believed you could rise? The late afternoon sun cast a soft golden haze over the vineyard, stretching shadows across the manicured rows of vines. I stood near the edge of the gravel parking lot, watching as the family trickled in, oblivious to the fact that every stone, every leaf in this place belonged to me. Frank, my father, stepped out of his silver SUV first, smoothing his thinning hair and adjusting his sunglasses as if he were about to walk a red carpet. Claudine, my mother, followed right behind, fanning herself dramatically even though it wasn't that hot. And then there was Dorian, my younger brother, practically glowing with self-satisfaction, dressed like he had just walked out of a business magazine shoot. They didn't notice me right away. They were too busy marveling at the place, making comments loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Now this," Frank said, slapping Dorian on the back. "This is class. Only the best for my son's birthday, huh?" Claudine let out one of her theatrical sighs. "Just imagine, Dorian," she cooed. "One day you'll have a place like this under your name, not some whatever it is your sister's doing." I smiled tightly and approached, smoothing the front of my sundress. No one offered a greeting. No one even made eye contact. I wasn't surprised. The party was already buzzing. Long tables had been set with crisp white cloths, bottles of wine lined up like soldiers, and a massive cake with Dorian's face airbrushed on it stood at the center of attention. Photos of Dorian, childhood, graduation, faux-candid shots in tailored suits were scattered everywhere. My name, my face, nowhere to be seen. I grabbed a glass of water from the service table, choosing to stay back, half listening as Claudine played hostess. "Isn't Dorian just the golden child?" she gushed to an older couple from the neighborhood. "We always knew he'd make something of himself. Not everyone has the ambition, you know. Some are better suited to simpler lives." Her eyes flickered toward me. A calculated glance, a loaded smile. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I wanted to respond. God, how badly I wanted to. But I forced myself to smile politely and moved closer to the rows of grapevines, letting the conversation wash over me like acid rain. The speeches began an hour later, after everyone had had enough wine to pretend the tension wasn't thick enough to cut with a knife. Frank cleared his throat loudly and tapped his glass with a butter knife. "If I could have your attention," he bellowed, "I'd like to say a few words about my son." I stood frozen at the edge of the group, my hands clasped so tightly behind my back that my knuckles ached. "Dorian's ambition, his drive, well, it makes a father proud," Frank continued, voice booming over the crowd. "He's a man who knows how to get things done. Not everyone can say that about their kids." Another sideways glance at me, like a punch thrown with a silk glove. Polite claps scattered through the crowd. A few awkward smiles. No one knew where to look. I kept my head high, my smile just a hair's breadth from cracking. My chest burned with humiliation, but I didn't move. I refused to give them the satisfaction. The evening sunlight deepened into a soft amber glow, the air cooling slightly. Servers bustled about, offering canapés and refilling champagne flutes. Conversations hummed, glasses clinked, a picture-perfect celebration if you ignored the undertones of cruelty lacing every other word my parents spoke. A sharp, familiar ache pressed against my ribs. A memory resurfacing. How many birthdays, graduations, milestones had I stood just like this, on the sidelines, smiling through the ache, pretending it didn't matter? It mattered. Frank raised his glass one final time. "Here's to a future we can all believe in," he said. His meaning was clear. A future without dead weight, without me. I watched the others raise their glasses, their faces a blur of forced celebration. I set my own glass down, untouched, and took a slow breath. For now, I chose silence. Not because I was defeated, but because I was planning. Because somewhere deep inside, a small voice, a voice that had been ignored for too long, whispered clearly, "Not this time." the glass still sat abandoned on the edge of the long table, catching the last bit of light like a forgotten promise. I stepped away from the crowd, each footfall deliberate, weaving between pockets of laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. My chest was tight, not from the wine I hadn't touched, but from the unbearable weight of pretending. Near the far edge of the vineyard, where the vines thickened and the noise of the party thinned into a muted hum, I raised my phone to my ear. The screen was dark. I wasn't calling anyone. I just needed an excuse to be alone for 5 minutes without having to explain myself. The breeze shifted slightly, bringing with it the scent of earth and ripe grapes. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, trying to steady the tremor that had taken root in my hands. Behind me, faint but still clear, I caught snippets of my mother's voice. "Honestly," Claudine said with a sugar-sweet lilt that never fooled me, "not everyone's cut out to succeed. Some people are better off marrying well, finding a nice, stable husband, settling down instead of whatever it is Lynn thinks she's doing." A few women tittered awkwardly. No one corrected her. No one defended me. The words didn't hit like a slap anymore. No, they sank deeper, settling into old wounds that never quite healed, no matter how thick a skin I thought I had built. The breeze carried me backward in time, whether I wanted it to or not. I was 16 again, standing in our cramped kitchen, clutching a sketch pad full of designs I had poured my heart into. Frank barely glanced at it before muttering, "Dreams are fine, but real life needs something sturdier than crayons and pipe dreams." Claudine had simply smiled, that same brittle smile, and said, "Maybe focus less on silly drawings and more on finding someone to take care of you, sweetheart." It had been the same song and dance through my early 20s. When Dorian flunked out of his second job, after wrecking my father's old truck and racking up debts he couldn't explain, it was me who emptied my savings to cover the costs. They hadn't even said thank you. Frank had just clapped Dorian on the back and told him, "Everyone makes mistakes, son. You'll bounce back." Mistakes, it seemed, were only forgivable if you were the right child. My phone buzzed uselessly in my hand, jarring me back to the present. I slid it into my purse and turned around just as Frank's voice rose above the party noise. "Let's all raise a glass," he bellowed, holding his champagne high, "to Dorian, the pride of this family. Thank God we have him, or who knows where we'd be." A ripple of laughter passed through the guests, some genuine, some strained. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. I could practically hear the unsaid words underneath. Thank God we don't have to rely on Lynn. My mother beamed up at Frank like he had just delivered a state address. Dorian laughed and tipped his glass at the crowd, his Rolex catching the setting sun. I forced a smile, a tiny, paper-thin thing. Inside, something sharp and electric was stirring, something that wasn't sadness. Not anymore. For so long I had internalized every slight, every whispered doubt, every backhanded compliment. I had worn their condescension like a second skin, pretending it didn't weigh me down. Tonight, though, something was cracking. The woman they thought they were mocking, the hopeless one, the dreamer, was standing on her own land, her own success hidden just beneath their arrogant noses. The thought should have made me feel triumphant. Instead, it made me sad. Sad for the years I had wasted trying to earn a love that was always conditional. Sad for the young woman who had believed their validation was something worth chasing. Frank laughed again, a booming, careless sound that made my stomach knot. I didn't need their approval. I didn't even want it. I glanced back toward the main courtyard where guests were milling, laughing, pretending not to notice the sharp barbs my parents kept throwing. The fairy lights strung overhead flickered on as twilight fell, casting a soft golden glow over the vineyard. And somewhere between my father's words and the clinking of glasses, a new truth settled deep in my bones. I would never let them define my worth again. The laughter around the courtyard carried on, but I no longer let it tether me. Instead, I drifted toward one of the side tables, pretending to adjust a centerpiece. It gave me a moment to steady the pulse roaring in my ears. The fairy lights above twinkled faintly now against the deepening twilight, casting halos around the guests. As I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, a young vineyard employee approached, balancing a tray of wine glasses. His khaki uniform was crisp, and his cheeks flushed slightly as he noticed me standing alone. "Good evening, Miss Sharp," he said warmly, offering me a glass with a small respectful nod. Time froze. The words were innocent, casual even, but they crashed into the fabricated world my parents had built like a hammer through stained glass. Frank stiffened mid-sentence, his laugh dying in his throat. Claudine's eyes snapped to mine, wide with sudden suspicion. Dorian, clutching a half-eaten canapé, stared at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know existed until now. I accepted the glass smoothly, giving the employee a polite nod of thanks. Poor kid. He had no idea he'd just pulled the first thread that would unravel everything. Conversations faltered nearby. Someone coughed awkwardly. The tension around our table sharpened, slicing through the festive pretense like a scalpel. Frank recovered first, forcing a hearty laugh that rang just a touch too loud. "Miss Sharp, huh? Looks like we got some VIP treatment tonight, eh?" Claudine chimed in, her voice brittle. "Well, of course, we do have connections. Family ties run deep, don't they, darling?" She leaned over and patted Dorian's arm like he was some visiting dignitary. I said nothing. I simply sipped my wine, savoring the taste, dry, bold, sophisticated, nothing like the cloying sweetness of their lies. Frank flagged down another server, puffing up his chest. "We'd love to meet the owner. Ought to thank him properly for putting together such a fine evening." Claudine gave me a pointed look, eyebrows raised. "You'll introduce us, won't you, sweetheart? I mean, you must know someone here to even get invited." The bait hung there between us, shimmering. I could have dragged it out, let them twist in the wind a little longer, but a lifetime of swallowing their condescension had sharpened my instincts, and tonight I was done playing. I set my glass down carefully, letting the faint clink ring out like a bell announcing a new hour. Then, with a calm that felt almost surgical, I turned to face them fully. "You're looking at her," I said simply. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Frank's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Claudine blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear fogged-up glasses. Dorian gawked, his hand still frozen mid-air with a half-eaten canapé. Around us, the buzz of conversation died a slow death. People turned subtly, curiosity sharpening their expressions as the tension became impossible to ignore. A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere behind me. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the weight of years slide off like a too-heavy coat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word hit like a gavel pounding a courtroom bench. "I own this vineyard," I continued, voice steady. "Every vine, every barrel, every bottle you toasted with tonight. It's mine." For a moment, there was only silence, thick and suffocating. Then a nervous laugh bubbled out of Frank, a brittle, cracking sound. "Come on, Lynn, don't joke about serious things. We're talking real business here, not your hobbies." Claudine forced a smile, reaching for the lifeboat he had thrown. "Yes, dear. It's lovely you're working here, or volunteering, or whatever it is." I didn't blink. "I own it," I repeated. "I bought this land 3 years ago, built the business from scratch, while you were busy telling everyone how hopeless I was." Frank's face purpled. Claudine's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Dorian, ever the golden boy, looked genuinely lost for once, a fish flapping on dry land. "You must be confused," Frank finally managed, voice tight. "No bank would give you that kind of loan without—" "Without what?" I cut in smoothly. "Without Dorian co-signing? Without you approving? Without someone holding my hand?" He blustered, searching for a foothold that wasn't there. "It's true," I said. "You never saw me, never believed in me, but it didn't stop me. It built me." I could feel the shift now, the crackle of energy changing direction. For the first time, it wasn't me shrinking under their scrutiny. It was them, exposed and scrambling. All around us, guests whispered behind napkins, through side glances they didn't bother to hide. I let the silence stretch a heartbeat longer, savoring it. And then, with a calm smile that tasted sweeter than any revenge could ever hope to be, I picked up my wineglass again and took a slow, deliberate sip. In that stunned silence, I realized the real celebration had just begun, and it was mine. The applause that never quite started died quickly. A brittle silence hung over the courtyard like a heavy mist. People avoided looking directly at me, choosing instead to glance at each other, uncertain whether to offer congratulations or condolences. It was almost comical, this sudden discomfort at a celebration they had orchestrated without ever thinking I might be more than background noise. Frank chuckled dryly, slapping Dorian's back a little too hard. "Well, isn't that something?" he said, his voice strained into cheerfulness. Claudine clutched her wineglass with white-knuckled hands, her smile pulled too tight across her face. "Of course we always knew Lynn was capable," she offered, the words tasting sour even as she forced them out. Dorian just stood there, blinking as if someone had hit him with a 2x4. His mouth worked silently for a moment before he shook his head and chuckled under his breath, the sound hollow. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Every second that ticked by spoke louder than anything I could have said. Guests began to murmur again, cautiously sipping from their glasses, giving polite smiles, carefully stepping around the invisible wreckage now littering the evening. Still, my parents weren't the type to admit defeat, not even when cornered. Frank approached me about 20 minutes later, while the sky had started bruising into shades of violet and gold, and the fairy lights buzzed overhead. "You know," he began, clapping me lightly on the shoulder like we were old buddies, "your mother and I have been tossing around a little idea. Something small, modest, really." I arched an eyebrow, waiting. "We've been thinking about investing," he continued, his tone casual in a way that made my skin crawl. "Starting a boutique wine label, maybe. Something family-oriented. Wouldn't need much seed money, just a little help to get it off the ground. And who better to support family than... Family?" Claudine appeared at his side like a ghost, her smile syrupy sweet. "Blood is thicker than water, after all," she chirped. "We stick together, don't we, sweetheart?" It took every ounce of discipline I had not to laugh. Not bitterly, not cruelly, but the kind of laugh that comes when you realize a magician's trick is so obvious you can't believe you ever fell for it. "I'll think about it," I said smoothly, draining my glass and setting it on the table with a faint click. That was it. No promises, no invitations for further conversation. Just a cold, clean end to the subject. They didn't push. Not yet. But the desperation in their eyes was loud enough to drown out the buzz of the lights. Later that evening, as twilight gave way to night and the vineyard lights painted everything in a soft, deceptive glow, I heard Claudine's voice carrying across the patio. She stood among a group of guests, a fresh glass of Chardonnay in her hand, laughing that high, practiced laugh she reserved for performances. "Dorian's been considering taking over a vineyard soon," she said breezily, waving her glass as if casually imparting divine truth. "Such a natural fit, really. He's always had the business mind for it. Probably sooner than later." Several heads nodded approvingly. No one looked my way. I stood rooted where I was, watching the scene unfold like an actor trapped in the wrong play. My nails bit into the skin of my palms, hidden discreetly in the folds of my dress. The arrogance, the sheer entitlement. This wasn't just about ignoring my success. This was about rewriting it, claiming it, acting as though my years of blood, sweat, and private victories were nothing more than a footnote to Dorian's inevitable rise. They weren't even subtle. And worse, they didn't even feel shame. I didn't confront her. Not there. Not then. I simply let the anger settle into something heavier, something denser, a decision crystallizing in my bones. No more pretending, no more second chances. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills and the first stars blinked into existence above the vines, I knew the simple, brutal truth. It was me or them, and I was done losing. As the stars shimmered faintly above the vineyard, the evening air cooled, brushing against my skin like a whispered warning. Conversations around the courtyard tried desperately to resume their rhythm, but the undercurrent had shifted. I could feel it in every glance, every stilted laugh. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I felt steady for the first time all evening. I wasn't surprised when Frank found me near one of the trellises, feigning casualness with every stiff movement. He sauntered over, hands in his pockets, wearing that lopsided grin he saved for when he thought he was being charming. Or manipulative. "Hey, pumpkin," he began, drawing out the words like we shared some inside joke. "Been thinking, Maybe it's time we make this little venture a real family affair. I folded my arms loosely across my chest, saying nothing. You know, he continued, shifting his weight, might not be a bad idea to get your mother and me listed officially, as co-owners, family trust and all that. Easier tax breaks, too. He winked like he had just shared some grand secret, some brilliant scheme I was lucky to be in on. Claudine wasn't far behind, gliding over with a flute of champagne and a sugary smile. It would show unity, she added, her voice lilting and false. People trust family businesses more when the whole family's involved. They thought they were being subtle. They thought flattery and pressure, sweetened with fake smiles, would coax me into compliance. I met Frank's expectant gaze with an expression so blank it almost hurt to hold. No, I said, voice low, even. Frank blinked. Claudine's hand tightened on her glass, the crystalware creaking ominously under her grip. No discussion? Frank asked, trying to chuckle it off, but his voice cracked at the edges. I shook my head once, slowly. This vineyard is mine. It stays mine. End of discussion. The look that passed between them was fast, but not fast enough for me to miss. A flare of anger, wounded pride, and calculation. Fine, Frank said, the words spat out like a rotten seed. He clapped me a little too hard on the shoulder and walked away, Claudine trailing behind, whispering furiously in his ear. I watched them go, not with sadness, but with a kind of detached inevitability. Later, as the evening limped along, Claudine's voice rose above the crowd once again. Ladies and gentlemen, she called brightly, a quick moment, please. A screen flickered to life near the main terrace, a slideshow rolling through pictures of Dorian. Baby pictures, high school victories, college ceremonies, even corporate headshots that looked suspiciously photoshopped to make him appear taller, broader, more impressive. Slide after slide, memory after memory, but not one included me, not a single one. Around me, murmurs grew. Guests exchanged awkward glances. Some even shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances in my direction before quickly looking away. A few mouthed small apologies with their eyes, but none dared to say anything aloud. I stood still, the glass in my hand tilting slightly. The ache was sharp, surgical, but it didn't split me open the way it might have before. Instead, it crystallized into something cleaner, sharper. Claudine beamed through the entire presentation, as if daring me to react, as if daring me to break. But I didn't. I smiled, small, unshakable, and cold as marble. When the last picture faded into darkness, polite applause broke out, hesitant, obligatory. I set my empty glass down on the nearest table and slipped away from the crowd, heart steady, steps sure. I found Frank and Claudine huddled near the wine-tasting station, laughing too loud at nothing. I approached them quietly, letting my presence press against them like a rising tide. Frank turned first, his grin faltering slightly. "Enjoy the show?" he asked, too loudly. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "If you ever try something like that again," I said, voice low enough only for them to hear, "you'll regret it." They blinked at me, twin masks of confusion poorly worn. "You've been warned," I continued, my tone flat, unyielding. "Push me, and you won't just lose access to this vineyard. You'll lose any place you still have left in my life." Claudine's mouth opened. Some protest, some excuse, but I was already turning away. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to explain. The line had been drawn. Now it was up to them whether they would cross it and face the consequences. I walked away from them without looking back, my heels pressing into the gravel path, each step heavier than the last. The night had turned cooler, the faint scent of ripened grapes mixing with the crispness of approaching autumn. The vineyard lights flickered gently against the deep blue sky, casting everything in a golden haze. As I rounded the corner back toward the main courtyard, a hand brushed my arm lightly. I turned to find one of the older guests, Mrs. Cantrell, a woman my parents always fawned over. Standing there, her mouth pulled into an awkward, sympathetic smile. "You deserve so much better, dear," she said, voice low but carrying enough weight that I saw a few heads nearby tilt, eavesdropping. It wasn't kindness. It was pity. Manufactured pity. I could see the strings attached to her words, the subtle puppetry orchestrated by Frank and Claudine. They hadn't just tried to humiliate me in private. They had sown whispers throughout the party like rotten seeds, ensuring that even strangers would see me not as a woman who had built her success, but as the wounded, overlooked daughter. My fingers itched to clench, but I forced my hand to stay loose, my face neutral. I nodded politely and murmured something vague, slipping away before the tightness in my chest could break through my practiced calm. I didn't owe them a scene. I owed myself my dignity. Inside the tent where the music pulsed low and the wine flowed more freely, Dorian was holding court. He lounged casually against one of the bar stools, surrounded by a few of our more impressionable cousins and some of the Vineyard's newer investors, who clearly hadn't caught up with tonight's drama yet. I was halfway across the room when I caught his voice, too loud, dripping with fake charm. "Good thing Sis had a few bucks to spare back in the day," Dorian laughed, lifting his glass in a mocking toast. "Best donation I ever got. Seriously, without that little loan, who knows where I'd be?" Laughter rippled around the small group, some genuine, some awkward, and a few people glanced at me, their smiles freezing in place when they realized I'd heard every word. Donation. As if the loan I had given him, money scraped together from my first miserable jobs, money he had begged for after crashing and burning at yet another opportunity my parents handed him, was some casual favor, a handout, not a sacrifice. I stood there for a beat too long, feeling the weight of every eye in the room shift toward me, expecting me to laugh it off, to play along, to stay in my place. I didn't. I didn't smile. I didn't raise my glass. I didn't even blink. I simply turned on my heel and walked away, leaving Dorian's punchline hanging limp in the stale air behind me. By the time I made it outside again, I had barely cooled down before Frank decided to make his own grand contribution to the evening's humiliation parade. Standing near the bonfire pit, drink in hand, he was regaling a group of guests with stories about the sacrifices he made for his children. "I could have been a partner at my firm, easy," he said, shaking his head with faux humility. "But no, I chose family, gave it all up to make sure they had what they needed." He chuckled, raising his glass. "At least with Dorian, it was worth it." The words struck like tiny, precise blows. Not one mention of me, not one acknowledgement of my years of struggle, the money sent home when bills piled up, the silent support that went unnoticed and unthanked. It would have broken me once. Not tonight. Not anymore. I felt something inside me harden, not brittle, not fragile, but forged. A kind of resolve that didn't need an audience, didn't need recognition. They had chosen their narrative. Now I would choose mine. I didn't storm over. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand to be seen. Instead, I slipped through the party like a ghost, gathering the pieces of myself they had tried so hard to splinter, fitting them back together with a fierce, quiet dignity they would never understand. As I moved past the clusters of whispering guests, past the clinking glasses and artificial laughter, I realized something so clear, so devastatingly simple. The only way they could keep hurting me was if I kept standing in their line of fire, and that was about to change. I moved back toward the courtyard, the buzz of the party washing over me like static. The twilight had deepened into full night, strings of lights overhead casting a soft, falsely warm glow. I spotted Claudine near the dessert table, a cluster of neighbors and distant relatives orbiting her like moths drawn to a flame. She was in her element, smiling too brightly, laughing a shade too loud. As I passed, her voice lifted over the hum of conversation, clear enough for everyone to hear. "Running a vineyard is such a lovely hobby," Claudine said, a sweet poison lacing her words. "But real business? That's for the big players." A few guests chuckled nervously. Some looked at me, then quickly away, their faces folding into polite discomfort. I didn't react. Not a twitch, not a blink. If Claudine expected me to flinch, to shrink down into the role she had assigned me for so many years, the grateful nobody riding on the coattails of the real successes in the family, she was about to be sorely disappointed. Her words slid off me like rain over stone. I had built something real, something enduring, while they clung to illusions. I would not let their pettiness carve holes into the life I had fought for anymore. I moved toward the far end of the patio, where a small platform had been set up, a makeshift stage. It was supposed to be for a light-hearted family toast, a few kind words shared among close friends. Instead, it became a platform for a performance that made the evening curdle in my stomach. Frank stood tall, a wide grin plastered across his face, holding a long, narrow box wrapped in navy paper. Next to him, Dorian preened under the soft applause of a few sycophants. "For our golden boy," Frank announced, his voice booming out across the courtyard. "A little something to remind you of everything still ahead." He pulled the box open with a theatrical flourish, revealing a gleaming Rolex, silver and gold, its face catching the lights like a beacon. The crowd clapped, some out of habit, some because they didn't know what else to do. I stayed where I was, hands loose at my sides, mouth fixed in a neutral line. No one glanced at me for acknowledgement. No one handed me a token of pride. There was no slideshow for me, no gifts, no whispered congratulations for the vineyard whose grounds they now trampled without even a nod to the woman who built it. But the absence didn't hollow me out the way it once might have. It clarified everything. They didn't celebrate me because, deep down, they needed me to stay small, to stay broken, to stay easy to dismiss. Their need didn't have to be my truth anymore. Before the applause had even died down, Frank was back at it again, pulling a thick white envelope from his jacket pocket. He clapped Dorian on the shoulder roughly, almost knocking the watch off his wrist. "And here's a little something to get you started on your next big venture," he barked, loud enough for every curious guest to hear. He shoved the envelope into Dorian's hand. A few nearby guests peered over, eyes widening slightly at the visible bulge of cash. Someone gasped softly. Another person clapped awkwardly. A cousin near the dessert table gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. It wasn't a gift. It was a spectacle. It was a crown placed on the wrong heir's head, a public coronation fueled by denial and desperation. I stood still, drinking in the sight. Every false smile, every sidelong glance, every unspoken judgment hanging in the heavy, humid night air. They thought this would humiliate me. They thought it would shame me into silence, back into my corner. They thought wrong, because standing there amid the forced celebration, I felt something ignite deep within me, not rage exactly, though anger pulsed thick and hot in my blood. It was something colder, sharper, the kind of focus you find when you stop asking for permission to exist. The next move wouldn't be words, it would be action. They wanted a war. They had just declared it, and I would fight it on my terms. The days that followed blurred together. A strange, buzzing quiet settled over the vineyard, interrupted only by the mechanical routines of harvest and the occasional phone call I was too tired to answer. It was a Tuesday morning when the letter came. A thick, official envelope, stamped from the Superior Court of Napa County. My heart didn't skip or race. It simply sank, as if it had known this was coming. I sat alone at the long oak table in my kitchen, the vineyard stretching out just beyond the wide windows, golden under the mid-morning sun. My coffee went cold as I broke the seal. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Petition for guardianship, filed by my parents, claiming I was mentally unstable, claiming I was incapable of managing my own affairs, claiming, laughably, cruelly, that I needed protection. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the edges of the paper blurred, but I blinked hard, forcing everything back into focus. This was it, the final card they had to play, and they had played it dirty. I set the letter down with careful precision, the way you might set down a viper you found coiled in your hands. Then I stood up, reached for my phone, and called my attorney. No tears, no begging, just a steely, razor-edged calm. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. I wore black. Not out of mourning, there was nothing left to grieve, but out of a cold, quiet defiance. The courtroom was sterile, the air thick with tension. Rows of polished benches stretched out behind me, filled with a scattering of acquaintances and nosy locals who had caught wind of the scandal. Frank and Claudine sat at the petitioner's table, all fake concern and martyrdom. Claudine clutched a tissue theatrically, dabbing dry eyes. Frank wore a dark suit that strained across his gut, his mouth set in a grim paternal line. I took my seat at the respondent's table, my attorney beside me, a sharp, unflinching woman named Meredith, whose calm professionalism was a balm against the venom leaking from across the aisle. When the judge, a silver-haired woman with piercing eyes, called the session to order, the room seemed to hold its breath. Frank was the first to speak. He painted a picture of a daughter too fragile to manage her affairs, prone to emotional instability, at risk of being taken advantage of. He spoke of concern and love, words that curdled in my stomach the second they left his mouth. Claudine followed, voice trembling just enough to sell the performance, describing me as isolated, erratic, in need of support. I said nothing, not yet. When my turn came, I rose slowly. Not rushed, not defensive. I opened a folder I had prepared and handed copies to the judge to opposing counsel. Bank statements, text message threads, emails, years' worth of documentation, proof of loans I had made to them, loans they had never repaid, loans they had pretended were gifts while privately mocking my generosity, proof of their attempts to siphon money under false pretenses, fake business ventures, medical emergencies that never existed, phantom debts owed to imaginary creditors, and more, screenshots of Claudine bragging to a friend about tricking Lynn into footing the bill again, Frank joking about how the dumb one finally paid off. There was an audible gasp from the back of the room. The judge's face hardened. Opposing counsel tried to object, but it was weak, flailing. Meredith was ready. She tore their argument apart systematically, citing case law, presenting affidavits from former employees who had witnessed years of emotional manipulation. Frank blustered. Claudine sniffled. But the mask had cracked, and underneath was something rotten and obvious. The judge recessed briefly. When she returned, her verdict was swift, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. Petition for guardianship is hereby denied. The court finds no evidence to support claims of incompetence. Furthermore, the petitioner's conduct raises serious concerns regarding financial exploitation and emotional abuse. The gavel came down with a satisfying finality. It was done. I stood, smoothing my jacket, turning to face the courtroom, and more importantly, to face them. Frank looked thunderstruck. Claudine had gone sheet white, the tissue in her hand crumpled beyond use. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply said, clearly, for all to hear, "You don't own me. You never did." Then I turned and walked out. The sunlight outside was blinding after the sterile dimness of the courtroom. I paused at the top of the courthouse steps, letting it wash over me. It felt like shedding a second skin, one stitched together with shame and duty and invisible bruises. I was free. Not because they gave me permission, because I took it. The courthouse doors swung closed behind me with a final thud that echoed louder in my chest than it did in the air. I didn't look back. Not once. Outside, life moved on without a second glance at the battle I had just fought. Cars honked, pedestrians crossed streets. Somewhere down the block, a street musician was playing a lazy guitar tune that didn't quite match the storm still slowly calming inside me. Word of the trial spread faster than I expected. Napa Valley wasn't a small town, but news like this, the kind you didn't print on invitations, had a way of rippling through the vineyards and dinner parties. Some old family friends, perhaps out of habit or discomfort, clung to the old script. I overheard whispers at a local cafe. Dorian's doing so well. Such a bright future ahead of him. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window, the comments sliding off me like rain off a freshly waxed car. They didn't know. They didn't want to know. It was easier to cling to the golden boy image, to pretend the cracks weren't there. And that was fine. Some people choose blindness because it's safer than facing the truth. I wouldn't waste another breath trying to peel their eyelids open. Later that evening, as the sunset bled over the hills in molten orange and purple, my phone buzzed. A message from Claudine. "Let's move past all this, honey. It's just family drama. Nothing worth ruining relationships over. We still love you." I stared at the words for a long moment, feeling a sadness deeper than anger could ever reach. Still pretending, still minimizing, as if dragging me into court, smearing my name, Trying to steal my freedom had been nothing more than a kitchen table squabble over burned Thanksgiving turkey. I didn't reply. Some silences were louder than any response. I let the message hang there in my inbox, unopened again after reading, a digital gravestone for a relationship long dead. The final blow came a few days later. Scrolling absent-mindedly through social media, I stumbled upon a public post Dorian had made. Some people just can't handle success, so they invent fake stories to tear everyone down. Family embarrassment, sad really. There it was, in black and white, no tags, no names, but everyone would know. Everyone already knew. For a moment the screen blurred as tears threatened, not because his words hurt in the way he intended, but because they confirmed, beyond any last shred of denial, that there was no going back. I closed the app. I blocked him. I set the phone down and folded my arms on the table, laying my head down for a few long, shaking breaths. Grief and fury wrestled in my chest, hot and sharp. But they didn't win. I sat up, exhaling slowly. They could throw words like knives all they wanted. I was no longer standing in their line of fire. One afternoon, about a week after the court case, I found myself wandering out into the vineyard. The sun was low, washing the rows of grapevines in a honeyed glow. I sat down on a weathered wooden bench near the edge of the property, the same spot where, years ago, I had dreamed wild dreams of success, of belonging, of being enough. The wind stirred the vines softly, a low whisper of a song only I could hear. Healing wasn't a clean, straight path. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't triumphant marches and sweeping speeches. It was sitting with the hurt. It was letting the silence answer questions you'd stopped daring to ask. It was understanding that some scars don't ever vanish, but they stop hurting the same way. I didn't have the perfect family. I didn't have public vindication. But I had peace. I had my vineyard. I had a future that belonged to no one but me. And that was enough. As the sky darkened into deep blues and purples, I tilted my face up toward the first shy stars peeking through. Some storms don't clear the sky, but they clear the path. And for the first time in my life, the road ahead was mine alone. After everything, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You are not obligated to keep toxic people in your life, even if they share your blood. Family isn't defined by who raised you or whose name you carry. It's defined by respect, trust, and love. And if those things are missing, you have every right to walk away. No apologies needed. Freedom doesn't always look like a victory parade. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's lonely. But it's always worth it. I fought for my dignity. I fought for my peace. And standing here now, I can tell you, it was the best decision I ever made. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose yourself over someone you loved? Do you believe blood should automatically equal loyalty? Why or why not? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your story. And hey, if this story touched your heart even a little bit, if you felt seen or understood, please hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Leave a 1-inch in the comments if you believe in choosing yourself. Let me know where you're watching from. And if this story wasn't quite your cup of tea, tell me why. Your feedback matters, and I want to create stories that truly resonate with you. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and most importantly, stay true to yourself.
I snagged your rich husband. The first call I received from my younger sister, Lois, who hadn't replied to any of my messages, came just before our mother's funeral. I just got back from Hawaii with Keith. I brought you some chocolate souvenirs. Enraged at her thoughtlessness, I lost control and yelled at her in front of the entire family. You can have my husband, just get to the funeral already. Taken aback by my outburst and what I'd said, Lois could only respond with a bewildered what from the other end of the line. After giving her the address of the funeral home, I angrily hung up. I knew she tried calling back, so I turned off my phone, sat down in the seat designated for the family, and tried to gather myself. My name is Emily, and I just turned 38. I grew up in a family of 4. My parents and my sister, who's 6 years younger than me. My parents were strict, especially with me, the eldest, but they always spoiled Lois because of her charming looks. Whenever Lois wanted something, she would flash an irresistible smile and say, "Emily, I want this," and I would almost always give in. Regrettably, this habit persisted even after she grew up, and she became an extremely troublesome sister. My father passed away due to illness 8 years ago, and my mother received a terminal diagnosis about 6 months ago. She had been in and out of the hospital. I married Keith, a senior colleague from work, 2 years ago and moved away from my family home to an apartment near my office. Over the past 6 months, I was driving an hour each way to take care of my ailing mother in between work. Lois had moved back home and quit her job a year ago after breaking up with her then boyfriend, but she insisted that I was better at caregiving and kept pushing the responsibility onto me. So I took a month off from work to care for our mother. But despite my best efforts, she passed away 2 days ago. And where was Lois? She had jetted off to Hawaii a week prior. I tried my best to convince her not to leave, but she wouldn't listen and went off anyway. At the funeral, after the priest finished speaking, friends and family began to pay their respects. It was a testament to my kind-hearted mother that not only relatives but many of her friends also came to mourn. Several colleagues from my company also showed up. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thanks, I'm just grateful that you allowed me to take time off to spend with my mother in her final moments." He's my father-in-law, the president of the company I work for. He's been extremely understanding about my situation and has helped me a great deal. But where is Keith? I haven't seen him here. Well, he's been overseas on a business trip since last week, and I haven't been able to reach him. Oh, I see. I'll ask the sales manager about it. Because it's a large company he runs, Keith and I are in different departments. Keith works in sales and constantly complains about always being busy with business trips. I tried to understand that he was not here during this difficult time, but I was anxious about having to handle everything on my own without being able to contact him or my sister. Meanwhile, my father-in-law took time out of his busy schedule to attend the funeral, and his support almost brought me to tears. I felt so grateful for it, I had to hold back the tears that were almost overflowing. In the limo heading to the crematory with the rest of the family, I turned my phone back on, hoping that Keith might have tried to contact me. To my surprise, there were nearly 30 voicemails, most of them from Lois. "Answer your phone. You can't just make up some ridiculous lies because you're upset that I took Keith from you." What I heard was her yelling voice. She took Keith from me? Had I heard something like that when she called before the funeral? I was too preoccupied with handling the mourners to comprehend properly what she was saying. "Lois and Keith are having an affair." No, that can't be true. I was startled and felt sudden agitation. Does that mean Keith was on a trip with her? Seriously. When I hastily checked the voicemail, there were several from my husband. "I'm so sorry. You're a strong woman, Emily. You can survive on your own. But Lois, I need to support her. So, let's break up." Hearing Keith's message, which sounded almost like a line from a soap opera, I muttered to myself, I wish I hadn't heard it. Why did I have to find out that my husband and sister were having an affair and having a great time in Hawaii during my mother's funeral? "You need to come right away if you want to say your final goodbye to Mom. We're already heading to the crematory." Reluctantly, I called my sister and told her, "That's not funny. Stop lying. You're just bitter because I took Keith from you." "But it's the truth. You must be upset about losing your husband. Yeah, he's the next company president and rich." "I understand how you feel, Emily. But there are good lies and bad lies, you know. You're an adult. You should know better." "I never thought I'd hear that from you." "I was surprised, though, to find out that you and Keith had been cheating," I retorted. Lois sounded really happy. Ever since we were kids, she would play tricks on me and laugh out loud when I fell for them. I sighed in frustration. "Anyway, it's not the time for this. If you want to say your final goodbye to Mom, come now." "I am tired of that lie. So why don't you ask his father?" I heard Keith's voice on the other end of the phone. They probably didn't expect me to bring up his father. My husband, who was apparently right next to Lois, took the phone. "Emily, is that true? If you don't believe it, do whatever you want." I'm hanging up now. After a while, we arrived at the crematory. This is my last moment to say goodbye to Mom, and my mind is a mess with the rush of these past few days and the grief of losing my mother. I no longer knew what to do, and I found myself with tears streaming down my cheeks. Seeing me like this, one of my relatives patted my back, saying, "Your mom would surely be grateful to you, Emily, who took good care of her until the end." I stood in front of my mother's casket and said my final goodbye. Mom, thank you for everything. I'm gonna miss you so much. It was right at the moment when her casket was carried out for the cremation. Wait a minute. Where's Mom? With a loud voice, my sister and husband rushed in. When Lois saw the casket disappearing behind the doors, she tried to cling to it, but the doors closed mercilessly in front of her. No, I haven't said goodbye to Mom yet, Lois was wailing, and Keith was standing behind her, stunned. We should move. It's disturbing to others. Why didn't you tell me, Emily? I couldn't see Mom at the end. It's your fault. My fault? Absolutely not. If it was this bad, you should have told me earlier. I can't count how many times I've explained our mother's health condition to Lois. Every single time, she'd just brush it off, saying, I don't know how to handle any of this. I'll leave it to you, Emily. That's right. This all happened because you didn't explain how serious your mother's condition was. It's your fault. Even my husband Keith started blaming me. I stared at them in fury. Then what were you two doing all this time? I raised my voice. Gasping, they finally fell silent. If you can't say it, I will. You were on a fun-filled romantic getaway in Hawaii together, weren't you? The relatives started to murmur as they had been observing this in disbelief. Up until now, whenever relatives asked, what's wrong with Lois? Or isn't Keith coming? I've been making excuses for them so that they wouldn't look like the bad guys. Mom, I'm sorry. I really wanted to say goodbye to you more quietly. Apologizing in my mind, I knew I had to clear up things here and steeled myself. When exactly did this affair start? You knew I was on leave caring for Mom, right? I was having a hard time. I asked for help numerous times, but all you two did was spend fun time together, didn't you? Enough. It's all your fault, Emily. It's because you didn't keep Keith close enough. What's that supposed to mean? You need to prioritize your husband more. He said he was bored at home because all you talk about is work and caregiving. Poor Keith. Oh, so that's what he said? As I glared at Keith, he quickly looked away, avoiding my gaze. Emily, you managed to marry a rich future company president, but you got conceited. That's why he got snatched away by me. You always do this, Emily. In reality, every time I had a boyfriend in high school or university, Lois stole them from me. The only time it didn't happen was with Keith because Lois was already living with her boyfriend at the time. What a shame. From now on, I'll be with Keith and become the future president's wife. So break up with him. Fine, you can have Keith. I'll divorce him. By then, I didn't care about anything. When I decided to marry Keith, I had no idea he was the son of the president. He was working at a regional branch and came to work at the headquarters in my department. Keith was bright, friendly, and good at connecting with everyone, quickly becoming a part of the team. I started to have feelings for him as he approached me. We started dating, and when he proposed eventually, I happily accepted. It wasn't until I visited his parents' house that I found out his father was the president of the company I worked for. It was a real surprise, so promise me don't come back later begging that you don't want a divorce. I won't do that. You're sure you want to leave me? Yes, I am. If you leave me, no man will marry a workaholic like you. You know that, right? I can live my life as I like on my own, but for today, please say your final goodbye to Mom properly. Keith and Lois exchanged looks, smirking as if they had won. The relatives furrowed their brows, watching the situation. I'm really sorry for showing such an unpleasant scene. I apologize to my relatives. I heard Lois whisper, you always play the good girl. I hate this about you. I had put up with a lot because she was my little sister, but now I'll stop considering her as such. I'm getting divorced from Keith, and I have no family left. All I need to do is prepare myself for that. I bit my lower lip hard. 2 weeks have passed since then. I moved all my stuff out of the apartment I had been living in and started living in a new condominium that I had leased near the office. I even put my parents' house up for sale. There's nothing left. Lois began living with Keith as I moved out. Of course, Keith and I have already completed our divorce papers and submitted them to the courthouse. I'm sure they're happily starting their newlywed life right now. Well then, I finished handling Mom's paperwork. Now the revenge begins. Watch over me, Mom. I smiled at my mother's portrait, picturing the events to come. Enjoy your newlywed life while you can, you too. The next day, while I was at the office for my job reinstatement, a lot of voicemail messages piled up on my cell phone. Hey, what's going on? We're divorced, aren't we? Why do I have to pay $30,000? Anticipating that they might come to my new place if I left them alone, I decided to meet at a local diner. As soon as we started talking, Keith was frothing at the mouth and yelling, "I received a document from a lawyer. What's this all about? We're already divorced, aren't we?" "Exactly. I don't understand." I had asked a lawyer to claim $40,000 from Keith as my share of the property and $30,000 from Lois for her part of the medical care coverage for our mother. The documents must have arrived at their place. It's something that they should have expected, but they probably didn't. I was exasperated. "You just need to pay what you owe." "That's not fair. Listen, don't think you can get away with what you've done. I've suffered from tremendous emotional distress. Should I sue you for that as well?" "Emotional distress? You cheated, that's a fact. So pay up." They fell silent for a moment, probably realizing they couldn't argue with the law. Then, after a while, Lois started looking down at me. "So, Emily, you're just after the money after all. Fine, I'll let Keith pay. If I borrow money from my dad, we can easily prepare the $70,000. "Keith, I know you don't have any savings. Lois, are you really okay being with a guy who doesn't have any money? Keith will become the president soon. Then he'll be rich. It's just a bit of patience." "Oh, Lois, you're after the money too, aren't you?" "No, I have plenty of love. Dad has been saying for a long time that he'll retire when he turns 65, so in 2 years I'll be the president." "Really? It'd be great if you could actually become the president." "I'm definitely going to become one. I'm the only son." "I wonder." Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer and burst out laughing. "I can't believe this. Has she finally lost it?" I heard my sister saying. But the real stage of the revenge that I had set up is just starting. "Keith, you've been missing work for quite a long time, saying it's because of the family funeral, right?" "Well, my mother-in-law is family too." "That's true, but the company knows what you've actually been doing." "Huh? You don't know that your father was kind enough to attend Mom's funeral, do you?" I had purposely not informed Keith and Lois about this, so Keith believed that his father knew nothing about what was going on. "I've let the company and the president, your father, know that you've lied about taking family leave for caregiving and went off to Hawaii with your mistress instead." "Oh, that was you?" "Never did any caregiving at all. You have the gall to act so brazenly. And you've been off work with Lois on several of your business trips, haven't you?" "I've reported that too." "How did you find out?" "Lois has been posting photos on social media showing where and when she went out, plus there were a few pictures with you in them." "How shocking." "Huh? You knew about my social media? It's the same account you had back when you were in high school. Of course I'd know." Lois looked uncomfortable, and Keith was taken aback by my words. "Hey, is it true that Dad knows everything? Just as my mother was family to you, your father considered her his family. Of course, he would know about the family funeral, as it should be reported to the company. Even after the funeral, he cared about me and had contacted me several times, so I have reported all the past events to him. He is quite furious. Also, he said he has absolutely no intention of making you the next president." "Huh. But I'm his son." He said he doesn't remember ever saying that our company follows the principle of hereditary succession. Also, he told me to convey that he doesn't need a son who would do such disloyal acts. "Huh. So Keith isn't going to be the president." As I silently smiled at them, their faces turned pale. I decided to press them even more. "And just to let you know, I'm becoming the president starting next month." "Huh. Actually, I had just received the official notice from the president and my superiors at the company. I have officially been appointed as the new president. There is no way they'd let you become the president. If you think it's a lie, why don't you call your father right now and ask?" Keith frantically called his father. Lois, his new wife, watched anxiously. "So, Emily is becoming the president." It was true. So I can't become the president's wife? If I knew that, I wouldn't have stolen you from Emily. But you just told me you love me. That was including your money. What did you say? I couldn't stand the couple starting their squabble in front of me, so I got up. "If you want to fight, do it somewhere else." "Oh, I'll be expecting the payment, thanks." "Wait, please don't abandon me. Please support me, sis. I apologize." I effectively sidestepped the hands that the two of them stretched out in desperation and left the place. After that, the two of them ended up getting a divorce. My ex-husband, Keith, was demoted by his father and eventually quit his job. Now he's working part-time jobs every day to pay what he owes me. Lois is said to be working in a bar at night. Apparently, she was doing well at first, but she was fooled by a bad man and ended up in a terrible situation. I've become the president. That being said, it's for a small company that's like a tenant in the main company building, a subsidiary in the caregiving industry that was established based on the proposal I submitted during my caregiving leave. Still, the caregiving business is expected to expand in the future, and I'm expected to do well. I'll do my best from now on. Earning only $750 a month is like a college student's allowance. Even students working at bars make more. Having a low-income wife is a disgrace. Maybe you should divorce her so our son can find a better wife. After all, he's the ultimate triple threat. My mother-in-law keeps making snide comments after seeing a pay stub, but it's not actually my pay stub. My name is Amanda. I'm a 32-year-old nurse, and I've been married to John for 5 years. We met at a college club, started dating, and eventually got married. We met at a party when he was a medical student, and I was a nursing student. John hasn't passed the medical licensing exam after failing twice and taking 3 years off. He is currently working part-time and studying hard for the exam. I'm working as a full-time nurse, so I'm the primary breadwinner. He's not the type to brag about making money in cosmetic surgery and posting pictures of a $468,020 Rolls-Royce on social media. He's serious about reading accounts of people who've lost family members to illness, checking the number of people affected by infectious diseases daily, and reading literature on Japan's healthcare system. I respected him even though he wasn't a doctor yet. He genuinely wanted to become a doctor who saves his patients, so I didn't abandon him despite his lack of income and entering his 30s. He kept the fact that he wasn't a doctor yet a secret from his parents. Sorry, my mom is too nosy. It's fine. I support you so you don't have to worry about your parents. Live your life the way you want. This is short term. That's why it remained a secret. The reason it wasn't discovered was that he worked at night as a security guard at the hospital where I worked, so he was technically employed there. He had knowledge and could obtain information from my stories on the job. No one suspected he wasn't a doctor yet because he could talk like one. So to his seldom seen in-laws, I said, yes, patients really like him. I believe that while cruel lies hurt people, kind lies sometimes save them. Telling a patient, you have 3 months left and there's no chance of recovery, is a countdown. It's worse than saying, you look good today, and you ate a lot. That's how people are. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who is the complete opposite of my serious and honest husband, has a very harsh personality. She's the typical overbearing mother-in-law. She looks down on me for being a mere nurse married to her son, the doctor. There must have been so many better options, like a beautiful doctor in dermatology. I always apologize and bow my head when she talks like that. I wholeheartedly support him in his pursuit of becoming a doctor, but at this point, he's just a high school graduate with extensive medical knowledge working part-time. He's not even a medical intern. But my husband is genuinely grateful to me, always saying, thank you for everything. I silently supported him. In fact, I'm also very busy with work. Our combined income was barely enough to make ends meet, but it couldn't be helped. I didn't care much about money when I entered this field because I genuinely admired Florence Nightingale. Currently, I'm a nurse in internal medicine, the most demanding field in terms of workload. The thought of wanting more money hasn't even crossed my mind. As long as we can live, eat, and stay healthy, that's enough. Isn't that ultimately what life's about? Despite the fact that I'm supporting my husband's living expenses and tuition, my mother-in-law goes around the neighborhood saying, my son is a doctor and earns well. In the first place, if he were a serious doctor, he wouldn't want his mother to brag about his income, good or bad. But my mother-in-law doesn't care and only talks about money, money, money. As her son, he has no choice but to silently endure it. She is completely unaware that he is actually working as a security guard in uniform at the hospital instead of walking briskly in a white coat like she brags about. Even if he were walking briskly in a white coat, it's not something to brag about and gossip about. I understand the feeling, but it should be restrained. I was worried that my husband's mental state might be affected and that he might fail the medical licensing exam because he's barely hanging on to becoming a doctor. If he ends up spending his entire life as a security guard after sticking it out for this long, it would be a shame. Moreover, to put it mildly, his personality is well suited for a doctor. His only weakness seems to be his kindness. That's why my mother-in-law speculates and says things like, my son makes $373,000 a year. For him, knowing that's false only adds more pressure. I once gently voiced my disapproval about it. I think it would be better for the patients if you didn't talk so much about his job because it might cause problems. After all, if you think about it from the opposite perspective, would you want to go to a doctor whose mother is constantly boasting about her son when you're sick? But my mother-in-law doesn't care. Shut up, you're just a nurse. You should be grateful that you could marry a doctor. It's luckier than winning the $3 million lottery. Money can't buy status, you nursing school graduate. She spews such verbal abuse. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for allowing me to marry John. I respect him both as a doctor and as a person, so please just leave him alone. You're so annoying. We can still make him divorce you and remarry. It would be pitiful if our future grandchild inherits your low IQ blood. This is beyond harassment. It's close to a violation of human rights. But I kept quiet. Somehow, compared to saving the patient's life or a sense of mission in my work, my mother-in-law's sarcasm seemed very trivial. I didn't really take her seriously. But as those days continued, that day finally came. In fact, my in-laws' house is a 30-minute express train ride from our house, so we don't visit each other much. I'm busy with work, so I wasn't around them much, which is why this lie has been working. However, I don't know if she was bored or just lost her patience, but my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced. What a cramped house. Why does my pride and joy of a son have to live in such a poor-looking house? She exclaimed. Looking at the row of medical books, she narrowed her eyes and said, well, he is my son, after all, and took a picture with her phone. But most of the books were for the national medical exam, so I was secretly nervous. Since this year's books were there, it would normally give away that he's still a student. My vital signs were in danger of betraying me, but I did my best to deceive her. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. We're both quite busy with work, so we haven't had time to find a bigger place, especially lately. I casually urged her to go home, but then she began going through my home of all things. Hey, what's with these weird dishes? If you're a doctor, you should buy Wedgwood. Yes, I'm sorry. They're from the dollar store. What did you say? Dollar store? I'm throwing them away. No, we couldn't afford luxuries because we were spending money on my husband's textbooks and tuition, so we cut costs on things like plates that didn't affect our simple meals. As long as we can serve food on them, it's fine. For now, passing the exam is the most important thing. My husband was, by chance, working as a security guard at the hospital at the time. It was a good thing he wasn't home. I didn't want to see him hurt, so I planned to get my mother-in-law to leave while he was at work. But she didn't stop rifling through our things. I'm going to throw away these clothes that look like a student's. If you're a doctor, you should buy high-end branded clothes. My husband's favorite clothes were thrown away. And then, what is this? A piece of junk watch? If you're a doctor, buy a luxury watch. She threw it away, seemingly unaware of the convenience of a smartwatch. The belongings of his that were being thrown away one after another were bought with the little money he had earned. He would have preferred to be in an OR treating patients instead of standing outside with his pride in tatters, but he was working hard for the sake of his dreams and for the sweat he had shed. But there was no stopping her now. It's because he married a poor girl that you have a poor life, even though he's a doctor. It's a wonder you don't live in a tower mansion. Unbelievable. I was thinking of going shopping together and at least getting you to buy me a bag or something. Statement was ultimately despicable. I had no choice but to point out that what my mother-in-law was expecting from my husband, student or not, was fundamentally different than how we really lived. I was a fellow medical professional. Gold digging for a doctor was out of the question. Mother-in-law, I don't mean to be forward, but he's not that extravagant. Our current lifestyle suits us well. I conveyed this casually, but my mother-in-law wouldn't budge. You're so annoying. Do you have any idea how hard he worked to get into medical school? We've been waiting to recoup his upbringing and tuition fees, and it's because of you that we're in this mess. Don't be ridiculous. My mother-in-law, increasingly heated, didn't stop searching my house. She rummaged through not just the kitchen but also every closet, discarding anything cheap. And then, unbelievably, she began to open the clear cases where we kept our utility bills, mail, and other paperwork. That's when she found the pay stubs. They were marked with $750 and $2.25. Despite my husband's name being clearly written on them, she either didn't notice or couldn't read the writing, and she screamed, $750? What do you mean, $750? You nurse, that's not my son's daily wage. Even anesthesiologists make $750 a day, and you're the wife of an internist making only $750. Are you slacking off at work or what? She began to go insane. That's why you're living in such poverty. You're a money sucker, huh? Barely working as a nurse and deceiving a doctor. You're just a part-time nurse because it sounds good. $750 is nothing, so quit already. That money was earned by him enduring younger doctors passing him by without even a glance, biting his lip and working in the gaps between his study hours for a very low daily wage. It was by no means the same with or without it. I thought it was a very pure number. But my mother-in-law's madness wouldn't stop, and finally, the worst happened. You're a poor, luck-bringing wife. Divorce quickly. At that moment, I heard the front door slam shut. My husband had returned home from his part-time job. His face froze when he saw his clothes and watch, which had been cruelly stuffed into a trash bag. He began to silently and carefully pick them up one by one. But my mother-in-law said this. John, I don't mean to be harsh, but please divorce this wife of yours. Why did you, with your high education, high income, and tall height of nearly 6 feet, choose such a pathetic woman? I'm so sad, and she only earned $750. My husband remained silent. I couldn't tell what he was thinking with his tightly pursed lips. My mother-in-law laughed and added, I'll bring the divorce papers for you. Leave this dusty room and this disinfectant-smelling woman behind and remarry a better woman. You're a doctor. Remarrying is a given. Then my husband slowly stood up and finally said, Mom, I've been keeping quiet about this, but I'm not a doctor yet. Huh? I'm sorry for hiding it, but I haven't passed the national exam yet. And about that $750. For some reason, my mother-in-law was so surprised that she turned to me for help. I don't understand what he's saying. This $750 payslip is yours, right? I decided there was no use hiding it anymore and replied, No, it's not mine. My husband chimed in. That's my salary for my part-time job. That can't be. You're lying, right? I'm not lying. It's true. I'm not a doctor yet. I failed the national exam twice. My mother-in-law, shocked to find out her son was not a doctor yet, suddenly started acting strangely. She slipped on some newspaper she had scattered earlier while rummaging through her house and fell to the floor. Help me. She slid and fell but managed not to hit her head by quickly putting her arm out. However, her right arm, the dominant one, broke with a loud snap. It was most definitely a fracture. My husband and I quickly treated her and took her to the hospital where we guided her to the orthopedic department. But my husband said, Mom, I'm sorry, but please don't come to our house anymore. And I don't want you to think of me as your son anymore. My mother-in-law was trembling from the shock of it all. But my husband continued, I knew you were bragging about me, but I put up with it. I felt guilty for lying. But when you insulted the money I worked so hard to earn, that was too much. But I never would have guessed you weren't a doctor. It doesn't matter if I'm a doctor or not. Do you think I'm studying just to say I earn $750 a day? I'm an adult, and it seems like we can't reconcile our differences in values, so let's cut ties. And so it seemed that my husband really decided to sever his ties with his mother. My mother-in-law, who had found her only purpose in life boasting about her son, seemed to be completely disheartened. Nowadays, she stays cooped up in her house, apparently too embarrassed to face her neighbors. That same year, my husband successfully passed the medical licensing exam. Though he was a bit older, he started working as a newly minted resident physician and shone brightly, never forgetting to show kindness, such as offering tea to the security guards. Our days became very peaceful and happy. If she had just waited a few more months, my mother-in-law's dream would have come true, and she could have seen him in his white coat. It's really a pity, but she brought it upon herself. You're always saying you're cold, so I set up a bonfire in the yard for you. Go warm yourself up there. Freezing from the cold, my mother-in-law pointed to the backyard visible from the window. Oh, what's that? I followed her pointing finger, and the sight made me collapse in despair. My name is Rosetta, a 27-year-old working housewife. I work part-time at a nearby supermarket. My husband, Andy, is an office worker and is 29, 2 years older than me. We have a 1-year-old son named Daniel. About a year before Daniel was born, we started living with Andy's family. Andy's father had passed away before our marriage, and since his mother was living alone, we decided to live together to save money for our child. From then on, the subtle jabs from my mother-in-law increased. After giving birth, I took a break from work to focus on Daniel, but she would say, "I can take care of Daniel. Why don't you work outside? Isn't it normal for a daughter-in-law to work when living together? Yet you're so lazy living here." I had gained weight after Daniel's birth, and she would scold me, saying, "You're getting fatter because you're lazy." So despite feeling unwell, I started working again. However, I wanted to take care of Daniel, so I didn't work full-time. But my mother-in-law would say, "Can't you work more?" I explained, I could, but Daniel is still young, and I want to spend more time with him. "Oh, are you saying you're not satisfied with me taking care of him?" I raised Andy. "I can raise a child better than you, who got sick right after giving birth. Just increase your work hours." I was overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's attitude, but I told Andy, "She wants me to work more, but I don't want to reduce my time with Daniel. Can you talk to her? Mom knows better about raising kids. You're just working part-time, right? We're living here to save money, so just do as she says. Plus, you haven't lost your post-pregnancy weight." Andy mocked my weight and told me to work more. One day, my mother-in-law called my workplace and asked them to increase my hours. The part-time leader at the supermarket was her friend, so my hours were increased. I couldn't oppose the decision. When I got home, I had to cook for my mother-in-law and Andy, clean the house, and even clean up after my mother-in-law's tea parties with her friends. I hardly had time for Daniel. "Leave Daniel to me. You should focus on work and house chores. You haven't lost any weight, have you?" It's unsightly, my mother-in-law kept making such remarks. But when Daniel made a mess or cried at night, she'd say, "You're his mother. Handle it. Can't you even discipline him properly? Don't neglect Daniel when he's in trouble, Mom," I said one day after cleaning the yard as my mother-in-law had instructed. Andy noticed me and said, "Why are you so dirty? Don't come into the house like that." I was cleaning the yard as mother-in-law told me. I do all the housework while she just holds Daniel all day and doesn't do any chores, I retorted, unable to hold back. "Don't criticize Mom. You're not doing much either. Can you please go?" Andy looked annoyed and pointed towards the other room without making eye contact with me. That was the moment I decided to divorce him. Most of my salary went to household expenses, but I started recording my mother-in-law and Andy's words on my phone and kept a diary of daily events. One winter day, I asked Andy for some money to buy winter clothes. "Winter clothes? Wear what you wore before. You earn so little yet want luxuries. The old ones don't fit. I need new ones. You gained weight again. Unbelievable." Andy threw a $50 bill at me. "This should be enough for a few clothes." "Thanks." I knew $50 would only get me one piece of outerwear, but I was preparing for a divorce and waiting for the right moment to leave Andy's family home. So, I gratefully accepted the money and bought a down jacket on my way home from work. However, the next day, I faced a shocking situation. I couldn't find my new down jacket anywhere. I asked my mother-in-law, who was relaxing in the living room, "Have you seen my down jacket?" "Oh, I thought you didn't need it anymore, so I threw it away." "What? I just bought it yesterday." "Oh, did you? I put it in the shed outside. Go check." I rushed to the shed only to find the jacket mixed with the trash. I picked it up and tried to clean it outside in the freezing winter, but it still smelled. I knew if I brought it inside, my mother-in-law and Andy would complain, so I hand-washed it late at night. The next day, I realized my mother-in-law had done something even worse. I hung my still wet jacket out to dry on the balcony of my bedroom before going to work. When I returned home after work, I noticed that all the drawers on the shelf containing my clothes were empty. My clothes were all gone. I ran to my mother-in-law and asked, "Where are my clothes? You bought new ones, right? So I turned your old dirty clothes into rags. Now you can clean the house with them." I checked the cleaning closet and found rags made from my clothes. I also noticed my jacket, which was still drying outside, was gone. "You're always saying you're cold, so I made a bonfire for you in the yard." Before I knew it, my mother-in-law was standing at the entrance to my bedroom, smiling slightly at me. When I checked the garden she had pointed to, I saw a fire being lit in the fire pit. I looked outside and saw my jacket's remains flying in the wind. "You burned my clothes. How am I supposed to survive this winter?" I exclaimed. You're chubby, so you'll be fine, my mother-in-law retorted, smirking as she walked away. Speechless and shaking with anger, I grabbed my diary and phone, wrapped Daniel in my only coat, and ran out of Andy's house in just a t-shirt. It was snowing heavily. A neighbor, who didn't get along with my mother-in-law and had been worried about me since I moved in with Andy's family, found me and drove me to my parents' house an hour away. This neighbor had seen me lose weight and understood my situation despite Andy and his friends always telling me I was overweight. When I arrived, my mom panicked at my attire. "Why are you dressed like that? Is it hot in the car? Are you sick?" I had to run away from Andy's house. They turned all my clothes into rags and even burned my new jacket. I've been collecting evidence for a favorable divorce, but I felt my life was in danger, so I fled with Daniel wrapped in a coat. Daniel was peacefully asleep. I was so relieved that my mother-in-law didn't take him from me that I couldn't help but cry. Seeing my distress, my mother quickly contacted my father and a certain individual. The next day, responding to my mother's call, Andy's grandmother, whom I'll call Grandma, arrived at our home. It turns out my father and Andy's father were old friends, and Grandma and my dad still kept in touch. Andy and I met and married because of this connection. Before our marriage, Andy was genuinely kind and friendly to my parents, but over time, influenced by the constant harassment from his mother, he began to treat me coldly. When I explained everything with evidence, Grandma was even more furious than my parents. She immediately contacted a lawyer and arranged for my divorce. A few days later, after leaving Daniel with my sister who lives nearby, my parents' grandma, the lawyer, and I visited Andy's family home. As we arrived, my mother-in-law stormed out shouting, "Where's Daniel, you kidnappers?" But when Grandma stepped forward, she retorted, "Who are you calling a kidnapper, you money grubber?" Andy, who seemed to have taken time off work, joined us and we all sat down to discuss. "We're here to discuss Rosetta and Andy's divorce, custody of Daniel, and the sale of this property," the lawyer began. "What do you mean by selling the land? It's Dad's ancestral home, and Mom inherited it. You can't just sell it." Andy laughed mockingly at the lawyer's words. "The building might be inherited by Andy's mother, but the land belongs to Andy's father's family. We've been overlooking the unpaid land rent out of goodwill, but now we'll be claiming the overdue amount and selling the land," the lawyer explained, handing over a document detailing the unpaid rent for several years since Andy's father passed away. Seeing the amount, my mother-in-law exclaimed, "How can we pay this all of a sudden?" Grandma silenced her with a stern quiet. She continued, "We've been notifying you every month. You chose to ignore it, and more importantly, make amends for how you've treated Rosetta." "Rosetta's accusations? She's my daughter-in-law. Why should it concern anyone else? Besides, Rosetta is probably just making things up. She always lied to get out of chores and work," my mother-in-law insisted, shouting at Grandma. "I've never lied. Just because you think I'm overweight, you've made me do all the work and chores, taking away my time with my child. Do you know how hard it was to be told to wear just a t-shirt in the depth of winter? You've been spreading these lies to everyone, claiming I'm eager to slack off," I said. The mother-in-law smirked, but when I played back the recorded snide remarks from her and Andy on my phone, she exclaimed, "That's fabricated." I then rushed to the closet, grabbed a rag made from my clothes, and slammed it on the table. "How do you explain this? My clothes have been turned into rags just like in the recording." "Rosetta, enough. Maybe Mom went a bit too far, but it's because you've always been lazy and just gaining weight. Reflect on your actions before blaming others," Andy said. "Excuse me, are you blind? Since coming here, I've lost at least 22 pounds. The reason my clothes don't fit isn't because I gained weight, but because I lost it so rapidly. Everyone but you and your mother is concerned about how thin I've become," I retorted. At my words, Andy seemed to realize for the first time how much weight I had lost. "I regret ever leaving Rosetta in your care," my father said, clenching his fists on his lap and glaring at Andy and the others. "I'm holding back my anger towards you right now, but I've mostly taken care of Daniel. Rosetta can't possibly handle him. We'll even go to court to ensure we live with Daniel." "That's fine, but courts usually favor the mother. And do you think they'll trust people who didn't even notice Rosetta's weight loss with Daniel? Can you afford a lawyer and court fees? I'll also claim alimony and land rent for this house." The lawyer calmly reiterated the situation. The mother-in-law seemed to realize they couldn't afford it. "This is so unfair." "Who's being unfair? You both bullied Rosetta and even tried to take Daniel away." Where did the money Rosetta earned go? Why did she flee to her parents' house in a t-shirt carrying Daniel in a snowstorm? My usually silent father-in-law suddenly began to cry and loudly blamed the mother-in-law. I'm truly sorry. We'll make sure to make amends for spoiling him and causing Rosetta such pain. Rama spoke to us, then Sigma the lawyer. Just pay what you owe. We'll cut all direct contact with you and inform our relatives. After that, I resigned from my part-time job, informing the headquarters about the mother-in-law's interference. The company apologized. While I never heard about any punishment for the mother-in-law's acquaintance, I was told they'd ensure no power imbalances among part-timers. A few weeks later, my divorce from Andy was finalized. I won custody of Daniel and received a fair amount of child support. The mother-in-law couldn't afford the land rent, so Andy had to cover it. But with the divorce settlement and child support, he struggled to pay. If he continues, they might have to vacate and demolish their house. Grandma joked, if the house is gone, the land will sell for more. Now I'm living with my parents, cherishing the time with Daniel. My father runs a company, and I plan to work there once Daniel is older. I'm using the divorce settlement to buy new clothes, enjoying coordinating outfits with Daniel. I look forward to spending even more time with him in the future. Alright then, if you're going to belittle me like that, you can forget about seeing your grandchild, sneered the son who had been incessantly asking his parents for financial support, a smirk suggesting victory on his face. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm a cut above my sister here. I have a steady income and I don't need mom to bail me out anymore. If you want to cut ties, feel free. We won't be showing you Arcade even when we have one. Please keep your distance from our lives. And don't think about crying to us about your retirement expenses because we won't pay a dime. Having had their say, the two left. In the end, just as my daughter predicted, all they wanted was to leech off of me and live a luxurious life. They even stooped so low as to exploit a parent's longing to see their grandchild. I won't let them manipulate me anymore. My name is Mary. I'm turning 54 this year. After having 2 kids, I divorced their father and managed to scrape by on the child support payments he provided. Thankfully, I was able to return to my previous job, which allowed me to make ends meet while putting a bit aside. I've tried to compensate for the absence of their father, but perhaps I was a bit naive in my approach. The wake-up call came when my son got married. Mom, could you help out again this month? Well, I guess I don't have much choice. My oldest son, David, got married to his high school sweetheart, Linda, about 6 months ago. They rented an apartment near my house, saying they were saving up to buy their own place. I even contributed significantly to their wedding expenses, all in support of their goals. Still, David would make requests for money with a humble gesture, a plea to me, his mother. He'd talk about how his company was struggling, how his salary and bonuses were stagnating. He'd explain how Linda's parents were unwell and he had to send them money. All kinds of hardships were shared with me. The more I listened, the more I felt he was being a bit naive about his role as the family breadwinner. Nevertheless, I continued to give him money for about 6 months after their marriage. Since we lived nearby, they would often come over. We frequently shared dinners, and I assumed David was bringing Linda over to my place. Despite being newlyweds, they seemed to prefer spending time with me rather than by themselves. I even hinted at this once, but Linda only responded with, "Your cooking is so good, Mary. I could eat it every day." Although I was flattered, Linda never showed any interest in learning my recipes or helping me cook. The years passed in this way until my daughter, Trisha, started applying to colleges. At that crucial time, I asked David and Linda to refrain from visiting so frequently. Yet they continued to ask for financial support, and once the college applications were over, they were back to their usual frequent visits. Around that time, Trisha and Linda started having disagreements. "Mary, your financial help has really saved us. The economy is so tough, and David's company isn't doing well. But that bag you're carrying, Linda, it's designer, isn't it? You seem to be doing pretty well for yourself." "Come on, Trisha, this isn't that expensive. Besides, you always butter up mom for money. And Linda, don't you ever think of getting a part-time job or something?" "Trisha, that's rude." "Who's being rude here? Don't you feel ashamed relying on your parents for money?" "Well, I do feel sorry for Linda because I'm not earning enough." "No, not to Linda, to mom." "It's all right, Trisha, let's call it. We're all going through a tough time. Let's be understanding. It wasn't the first or second time I had to mediate between my children like this during meals. I understood Trisha's complaints, but I believed they just needed to endure a bit longer. I trusted they would soon say they could stand on their own feet and wouldn't need any more financial support. Above all, she didn't want to burden her children with money issues, especially without a father figure around. These were some of the thoughts running through Mary's head as she finished dinner and started cleaning up. She heard Linda from behind. Excuse me. Mary turned around with a smile, thinking that the moment she had anticipated had arrived. Linda's words froze her smile. Thank you so much for your support, Mom. It's really a big help. It's okay. I'm sorry Trisha can be a bit of a nag. Don't worry about it, but I have a favor to ask. What is it? Recently, I've been thinking about having a child, but I'm not confident about the finances. What? Well, it's hard to have a baby when you're older, isn't it? Well, I guess it might be. So, I was wondering if you could increase the amount of support money a little more. Shockingly, David and Linda weren't discontent with walking on their own feet. They were actually planning on having a child in this situation. How can they consider having a child when their financial outlook is so unstable? Mary thought. She tried to hint that it was reckless, but Linda seemed irked and countered. Don't you want to see your grandchild? I'm not saying I don't want to. Exactly. I'm an only child and I really want my parents to meet their grandchild as soon as possible. But you do realize that having the child will make things even more difficult. I'll start working too. Then we'll manage. David has also reassured me about this. Despite Mary's advice, Linda insisted that everything would be fine and there was nothing to worry about. As a result, Mary ended up increasing her monthly allowance to them from $1,000 to $1,200. When she told Trisha about this, she was indignant, insisting, Mom, you're definitely being duped by them. But Mary still dreamed of the day when the two would become independent. A few years after she increased the allowance, David came to her house alone. Apparently, he knew she was off from work that day and seemed anxious to discuss something with her. Is Trisha here? I think she's studying in her room. Why, do you need something? No, it's okay. I just have something to ask of you, Mom. I hope it's not bad news. Well, I was wondering if you could increase the allowance a little more. Mary had kind of expected it from David's demeanor, but she was utterly disappointed that both he and Linda just kept asking for money with no remorse. She let out a heavy sigh and finally, in a loud voice, reprimanded David. Enough is enough. How long do you plan on relying on your parents? No, you're misunderstanding. Linda has been getting tests done at the hospital. Is Linda sick? No, not like that. She's been getting tests done for childbirth and it's turning out to be more expensive than we thought. We're short on cash. That's why I told you it's not a good idea to have a child without proper planning. What will you do if something unexpected happens? If the child gets injured or if one of you falls ill, you can't just say we don't have money. You don't think everything will be fine just by betting me, do you? Don't get too angry. I didn't know the tests were going to be so expensive. Isn't that odd? Mary turned around at the sound of the sudden interjection to find Trisha, who had seemingly been in the living room for a while. David made a sour face trying to shoo her away. But Trisha stopped him from saying anything and approached him. What kind of tests are you talking about for childbirth? If she's pregnant, can't you check it with a pregnancy test? What test is it? I don't know. Linda went alone. I just heard we don't have enough money. Why did you let Linda go to the hospital alone for such a serious matter as childbirth? Normally couples go together to listen to the doctor, don't they? David, you have the day off today, right? Don't butt in. You're just a kid who knows nothing about pregnancy. The one who doesn't understand what even a kid does is you, David. There was some arguing, but David couldn't refuse Trisha's points and reluctantly left. While I thought Trisha had a point, I told her, isn't it okay to cut them some slack considering their situation? She sighed at me. Mom, are you serious? What do you mean? They just want money. Their reasons are surely fabricated. Why would you say that? Unable to hold herself back, Trisha went back to her room and returned with her smartphone. She showed me several pictures. It was Linda's bag. Linda claimed it's a cheap one, but I think it's real. She made fun of my bag, saying it's pathetic, and laughed. This bag costs $1,200. That's the same as the monthly allowance. Yeah, and it's a high-end brand. And no matter how cheap it is, she had a different bag each time she came over. I think she's just spending the allowance on these kinds of things. You might be right. Linda did have a lot of different bags. She was laughing behind your back, calling you a fool for not noticing. You wouldn't know. Then Trisha showed me a recording. It was a conversation between Linda and Trisha, recorded when I was at work and Linda had come over to the house. Trisha, I know you don't carry anything but cheap bags and you're not interested in money, right? Could you ask your mom to increase the amount she's sending to me? Didn't you say something like this before and got some money from mom? Just an additional $200 isn't enough. Is $1,200 okay? She thinks she's taking care of her son and his dreams for just $1,200. She could at least give us more so she might get to see her grandchild. How audacious. Don't you understand it's better for the world if young people spend the money instead of the old hoarding it? Hey, Mom. Are you still going to keep sending them money after they said all this? Her voice was unmistakably clear. Trisha had secretly recorded their conversation on her phone that was stashed in her pocket. Upon hearing it, I felt both disappointed and deeply sorry for Trisha. She had been exposed to her brother and his wife begging their own mother for money. It was a wake-up call. I need to talk with David and Linda. I'm glad. If you're gonna do that, I'll help you however much I can. Thank you. The next day, I invited the two of them to my house. Linda arrived with one of those $1,200 bags in her hand, her face beaming with delight. Trish and I sat down with them at the living room table. I'm going to stop sending you money. What? What are you talking about? We can't handle this kind of surprise. That's right, mother-in-law. My medical expenses are piling up and it's really causing me trouble. Why don't you just save your money instead of buying those expensive bags? Linda, who initially tried to be humble and gain my favor, sighed heavily as if she had been wronged when I mentioned the bag. Don't you want to see your grandchild? I would feel sorry for the child being born to such irresponsible parents. Are you saying that even though your son is in trouble, you're not going to help us? I've been helping you enough. I've been sending you money for 10 years now, David. You should stop this already. It was you? You must have said something to Mom. Trisha has nothing to do with this. It's my decision based on your behavior. As I firmly stated this, David and Linda fell silent. Seeing this, I felt relieved that we could end this after a decent conversation. But then David laughed in a mocking tone and started shouting at us. Well, fine. If you're gonna insult me like this, then give up on ever seeing your grandchild. What are you talking about? Weren't you the one who was disrespecting Mom? You kept sending me money because you thought I was useless, right? That's right. You kept paying us because you thought David was struggling, right? What are you trying to say? Sorry to break it to you, but unlike you, I'm actually competent. I've been earning my own money, so I don't need Mom's help. Feel free to stop giving us your petty cash. You're blaming us, but you're just saying you can't go on without the money, right? Yeah, that's right. But don't come crying to us for money for your old age expenses after showing us this attitude. And even if we do have a child, we won't be showing you the baby's face. Never interfere with us again. With these words, they left with a bang. As it turned out, Trisha was right. They were simply trying to bleed me dry and squander the money. Worse, they exploited my desire to see my grandchild. Trisha was grinning with satisfaction as I sank into my thoughts. Don't worry, they'll be back begging in no time. But from now on, it's a new game, Mom, Trisha spoke with certainty. And she was right. Just half a year later, David, still in his work clothes, showed up at the house clutching his credit card statement. Listen to me, Mom. Linda's out there spending my money on bags and wallets like it's nothing. Oh, why are you surprised now? That's cold, Mom. Well, didn't she always behave like that, even when she was receiving $1,200 from me each month? $1,200. She said she was only getting $500. You didn't even know how much allowance I was giving to your wife, did you? That's disappointing. Indeed, I used to put the money in an envelope and give it to the two of them. I felt a headache coming on from my son's pathetic ignorance, not even checking the amount before using it. She's spending that $1,200 on all sorts of useless things, and our savings are depleting rapidly. That's how it's always been. I don't understand why you didn't realize it sooner. My words also served as a critique of my past self. Perhaps by being in the same position now, David might understand a bit of how I felt. But ultimately, David couldn't stop Linda, and he would only rely on me for money. There was nothing I could do for my son, who complained and lashed out without a hint of apology. Their quarrel seemed to continue, unable to stop Linda from spending more than her income. It was no surprise considering they were unable to save even though they were receiving $1,200 a month for free. As I observed their poor financial management, I couldn't help but wonder where I went wrong in raising them. I just kept going, doing as Trisha told me to. "Mom, I don't know you moved," was the message I received about 10 days after the move. Trisha had anticipated that David and Linda would come asking for money again, and so, as a precaution, we sold our house and moved to an apartment with easy access to Trisha's workplace. Of course, we didn't tell the two of them our new address. Just as Trisha had predicted, they came to our old place and, finding us gone, sent a frantic email. I received a flurry of apologetic emails from David, mixed with preaching about how he wouldn't care about my old age or his children's future. If they are this desperate, I wonder if they have also been rude to Linda's parents. That's not likely. Linda's parents are just like her, always asking for handouts. Trisha told me, sharing some information she'd learned about Linda's family. From the $1,200 I used to give her, it seemed Linda had also been passing on some money to her parents. It finally made sense how they could spend so much each month. And now, with their disposable income finally gone, it seemed that David and Linda were being pressed for money by Linda's parents. I was speechless at how my son and daughter-in-law could still think of relying on others after all they had gone through. Seeing the emails I'd received, Trisha laughed and said, "I told you so," before promptly blocking them. I felt neither sympathy nor pity for David and Linda, even if they apologized. After all, they were so proud of their good and common qualifications, so they should work hard together. Of course, Trisha had enough trouble over David. I've been helping him out, even dipping into my savings while working, but I have done enough. From now on, until Trisha finds a good partner, we'll support each other as mother and daughter. My name is George Smith, and I work at a small company. It was at my brother's memorial service that I reunited with Susan, who is now my wife. Returning to my rural hometown for the first time in a while, I took the long-distance bus. "It's been a while. Have you lost some weight? Are you eating properly?" Susan asked. "You haven't changed a bit." "What do you mean? Are you trying to say I'm beautiful as always?" "No, I mean you're still as straightforward as ever," I replied. "Your brother has been cheeky since the first time I met him," Susan said with a smile, looking at my brother's portrait on the wall. She was his wife, making her my sister-in-law. The first time I met Susan, I was a college student home for summer break. My brother had already started working and brought her home as his fiancée. "Nice to meet you. I'm Susan. I've been wanting to meet you since I've heard a lot about you from your brother," she said. "Oh, well, nice to meet you too. You're George, right?" I responded, noticing her straight blonde hair that reached her chin and beautiful, determined eyes. My first impression was that she was a beautiful woman. Just her presence brightened our dark living room. Though my brother was usually quiet and reserved, he was eloquent in his praise of her. Susan had grown up with a single parent, like us. She and her father supported each other, but he passed away when she was in college, leaving her alone. "Well, I've always had you and Mom," she said, living alone but earning my respect. Susan handed me a sweating bottle of beer and said, "Your brother just exaggerates," smiling happily. Thinking back, I realized I was already drawn to her. Even so, my older brother was a significant figure who had supported Mom and me after our father passed away, always prioritizing family over himself. I wanted to bless his marriage and congratulated him, hiding my jealousy. However, my brother was diagnosed with cancer and died despite his battle with the disease. When I heard the news, I was shocked but more worried about Susan. On my way home, I kept thinking, how should I console her? "Hi, Mom," I said as she greeted me with red eyes, looking terribly depressed in her mourning clothes. Susan spoke for my mom, who was too choked up to speak. "Hi, George. Thank you for coming." She smiled serenely, just like when we first met. Although I was at a loss during the entire funeral, Susan maintained the dignified demeanor appropriate for the chief mourner. At that moment, I realized how childish I still was. From then on, my goal was to become an adult like my brother. After graduating from college and starting to work, I worked tirelessly to avoid relying on my family. I was recognized and promoted at my company and eventually got married. Before I knew it, years had passed since I last returned home. My days were filled with work and supporting my partner. Then a postcard arrived. "George, please come home this Sunday. It's just a small memorial service with family." But your brother and mom have been wanting to see you, Susan said, her voice filled with warmth. Even after my brother passed, Susan stayed with my mom, living together. Back then, Susan told me, "Leave your mom to me," and sent me off. Tracing the handwriting she wrote at the kitchen table filled me with nostalgia. I decided to go back home for the first time in years. Susan hadn't changed at all. She welcomed me home without a single complaint about not hearing from me or seeing me for so long. It was just the three of us for dinner, Mom, Susan, and me. As we ate the slightly extravagant meal they had prepared, we reminisced about my brother. Mom and Susan seemed close and happily shared stories about the time I wasn't around. After a while, Mom seemed to tire herself out and went to bed early. When it was just Susan and me, I felt a bit nervous. "Cheerful as always," she said. "It's really lively when the family gets together." Your mom was brighter than usual. Thanks, George. You too, Susan. Thanks for taking care of my mom all this time. Don't be silly. Your mom is like my real mom too. It's no trouble at all. She waved her hand dismissively and lifted a beer bottle. Come on, let's drink. Tell me what you've been up to. I told Susan everything. How I graduated from college and got into a good company, how frustrating it was when I couldn't do my job well at first, about the first big project I was assigned, how I trained my subordinates and how they finally became competent, and about my married life. Sorry I couldn't make it to your wedding. Don't worry about it. My wife wanted a small ceremony with just friends anyway. You did send a gift. I hope so, but I was worried you couldn't bring your wife because I'm still living here. That's not true. I came alone because we recently separated. I was quite drunk and said more than I should have. Really? Work kept me busy and we started drifting apart. Is your job that demanding? Yeah, I'm in charge of a big project. I leave at dawn and come back at midnight. Are you eating properly? Not really. I only come home to sleep. That's no good. I know. Anyway, tonight's dinner was great. I hadn't had Mom's cooking in ages. I love her sautéed vegetables. Actually, I made that. Your mom taught me. Oh, so it was you. Susan, it was delicious. Do you mean it? Yeah, I could even eat it every day. Then how about I come over and take care of the house for you? As we were both tipsy and I thought Susan was just joking, I agreed lightly. I'll be happy if you do. Then I returned to my apartment with a hangover. 2 days later, Susan actually showed up. I finished work early for once, thinking I'd finally tackle the pile of laundry, and came home to find her in an apron. Hi, George. What are you? How did you? I told the landlord I'm family and he let me in. Nice place. The landlord seems nice too. What about Mom? She gladly sent me. She even asked me to take care of you for a while now. Got it. Dinner's ready. Hey, you know what? You can complain while eating. Come on. Even at the entrance, I could smell the delicious food, which made my stomach growl. After getting a lecture from Mom on the phone, I reluctantly let Susan handle the housework. Despite my initial reluctance, her meals were amazing. Besides, having someone greet me at home was wonderful. Her tomato stew, spinach salad, and cheese pasta were superb, making me look forward to dinner after a hard day at work. With peace of mind, work went smoothly, and I even found myself with some free time. When I started coming home early, having a drink with Susan in the evenings became our routine. We spent those quiet times chatting about nothing or watching TV while enjoying the snacks she prepared. You and your brother are alike in that you both can't handle alcohol, she would tease. Susan could drink anyone under the table and still stay sober, while I'd give up and end up walking her to the apartment she rented nearby. Listen to what happened at work today. I'd start, and she would listen to my slightly drunken complaints without a hint of annoyance. Her encouraging words, "You are doing great," or "You can do it, don't worry," gave me the strength to keep going the following day. Having completely opened up to Susan, I confessed one evening, actually, the real reason I separated from my wife wasn't just because of work. Really? She asked. Yeah, I was too busy to keep promises, and when I made her mad, I couldn't apologize sincerely. I'd just say, "I'm busy, just deal with it." That means you both were immature, you and your wife. I felt a bit annoyed. Immature? Yeah, you couldn't empathize with each other because you were both too caught up in yourselves. She was right. Seeing my silence, she added with a gentle look, "But you're different now, right? You're kind enough to walk me home even when you're tipsy. You're a thoughtful and caring person." My husband was quiet too, but he was kind. He'd say, "You're strong. But you don't have to pretend when I'm around. Lean on me when you need to. From the moment I met Susan, I thought she was an adult who handled everything effortlessly, but she had her own vulnerabilities and had been living on edge without any family to rely on. Seeing that new side of her, I felt a strong desire to protect her for my brother's sake too. The following day, I worked hard to finish on time. Seeing my determination, my younger colleague seemed surprised and offered to help. "George, what's gotten into you?" "Oh, nothing. I'm curious now. I might not be very reliable, but please tell me what I can do for you." "When I was a newbie and clueless, I made a huge mistake and you apologized on my behalf. Since then, I've wanted to be useful to you." I was deeply moved when my younger colleague, whom I had been looking after since he was new, said that to me. "Actually, I'm going to confess my feelings today." "Confess to who?" "To my late brother's wife, my sister-in-law." I explained about reuniting with Susan. "That's complicated, but you're a mature and great guy. I'm sure it'll work out." I realized I was unknowingly comparing my ex-wife to Susan, trying to act grown-up and getting stubborn. "You called me mature, but I think Susan sees me as a kid." "What are you talking about? Men are always treated like kids by women. I have a sister, so I know. Sometimes I think she still sees me as a grade schooler." "You were kidding. Susan wouldn't think I'd be that young." "Don't worry, I'm sure she loves you." "Hey, stop talking nonsense." "Don't worry, I'll handle the assignment due tomorrow, so go home early." Although I thought he was cheeky, I couldn't wait any longer and left work in a hurry. "All right, I'm counting on you." I ran home as fast as I could, eager to see Susan and tell her how I felt. "Wow, you're back early." Out of breath from running, I couldn't utter a word. Though puzzled by my breathlessness, Susan smiled warmly. "Since you're home, let's have dinner and some drinks," she said, taking my bag. "Listen to me," I tried again, but Susan was busy preparing dinner. "What did you say?" "Let's have this good wine I found." "Susan, could you please listen to me?" When I called her name, she looked startled. "What's the matter, speaking so formally?" "Well, tell me while we drink." Seeing my serious expression, she looked vulnerable. "Sorry for scaring you." I calmed myself and stood right in front of her, carefully not to frighten her. "Before we start drinking, I want to say this. Susan, thank you for everything. I've been able to work hard because you're here. Coming home to you makes me truly happy. Yesterday, you said I'm still a kid, and you're right. Compared to my brother, I'm still far behind. But I love you, Susan." "Are you serious?" "I want to protect you for my brother's sake too." When I confessed, Susan started to cry. Seeing her in tears made me flustered because she was usually so strong-willed. "Oh, sorry, did I upset you?" "No, I love you too, George." Nothing drastically changed, but Susan and I became a couple. If anything changed, it was that we started going out together on weekends. We went to movies and shopping. I learned that Susan didn't like taking the bus alone. One time in college, I overslept and ended up at an unfamiliar bus stop. I panicked and got on the wrong bus in the opposite direction. It was late and I was really scared, thinking I couldn't get home. I had no one to call to pick me up, and I cried at the dark bus stop. "It's okay now. If you get lost somewhere, I'll pick you up." "Thanks, George." Susan looked so relieved, almost childlike. Our relationship was going well, but during the critical phase of my project, I made a mistake. I had promised to have dinner with Susan, but a meeting ran late and I couldn't contact her for 2 hours. When I checked my phone, there were missed calls from her. "Susan, I'm swamped at work and can't make it tonight. Isn't there something you want to say to me? I was worried because I couldn't reach you." "I told you I was busy. I'm hanging up now." Sensing she was about to lecture me, I abruptly ended the call. Looking at my phone, I saw messages from her. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Are you sick? Please call me." Her messages were filled with concern, which struck me. She had expressed worry on the call too. I was shocked at my own mistake. What should I do? The more I thought about apologizing, the less I knew how to do that. I missed the timing completely. I feared our relationship might end up like my previous marriage. Just thinking about that made me freeze up, leading me to avoid contact with her for several days. Then one day, I came home to find Susan waiting for me. Standing by the door, she greeted me as usual. "Hi, George." Seeing me avoid eye contact, she suggested, "How about going out for a drink? Maybe you can apologize then." However, I was filled with shame and replied stubbornly, You don't need to take care of me like this, acting as if we were back to just a pre-relationship dynamic. This time only, she said cheerfully. You know I'm strong-willed. I wouldn't do this for anyone else. You're special. Okay. I'm giving you a special pass. Her hands were tightly clenched and trembling. I was taken aback. How much had Susan worried about my silence? Just knowing someone will pick me up makes me feel secure. Why hadn't I noticed her vulnerability hidden in those words? Even though I said I wanted to protect her for my brother's sake too, I hadn't been doing that at all. I'm sorry, Susan. Please forgive me. Of course, I forgive you. Thank you for apologizing. Hearing my words, she laughed and cried at the same time. As if a dam had burst in my heart, I apologized to my brother. I'm sorry. I'll become more mature and protect Susan from now on. In my imagination, my brother had a resigned look on his face. The day I decided to propose to Susan, I called my mom. My mom was overjoyed and told me that she had dreamed of my brother, who said in her dream, George might be unreliable at times, but I'm sure he'll change. He will surely take care of you and Susan for me. As always, he saw right through me. I can't compete with him. I felt like I was being patted on the head by his large hand after a long time, which made me cry. Please watch over me from heaven. I addressed my brother in heaven. From now on, I'll walk through life with Susan. I might not be able to become like you, but I'll live my life responsibly, both at work and at home, in order to make Susan happy, the woman I love. So don't worry. After I hung up the phone, Susan asked, Is your mom doing well? Yeah, she's doing great. By the way, Susan, there's something I want to ask you. It's New Year's Day and our 6th wedding anniversary. For the first time, our family of 4 is visiting my husband Kevin's parents. It all started with just one word from Kevin. I want to settle things. I want you to come with me. Kevin, who usually wears a smile, had an unusually serious expression, likely due to nervousness. Of course, let's handle it properly, I said, consciously putting on a smile to help Kevin relax. Seeing me like that, Kevin smiled gently. Kevin's nervousness about returning to his hometown stemmed from the fact that this wouldn't be the usual Christmas scene. Normally, we would exchange Christmas gifts, our children would receive many presents, and as a couple, we would give many gifts to our relatives' children. But we knew that this year would be different because of Kevin's parents. It was evident that they were treating us terribly, and such mistreatment would likely be directed not only at us, but also at our 2 children. Thinking about it made my heart ache. Even so, someday we would have to face this situation. In that case, I decided to follow Kevin's lead. Kevin and I work as construction workers for the same company. I joined the company after graduating from middle school because I wanted to lessen the burden on my mom, who raised me and my 2 siblings by herself. Since I was in the 4th grade, I knew I wanted to help her as soon as possible. Even though girls don't usually work in the field, my mom, who I thought only worked as an office worker at the civil engineering company, was surprised when she learned I would be working as a laborer. She widened her eyes and said, Sitting still at a desk and working is impossible for me. Going outside is much more enjoyable. Despite her concerns, I argued with the CEO about working in the field because the salary was good. My mom knew that once I made up my mind, I wouldn't listen to anyone, so she didn't say anything more. On my first day at the company, when I was called by the site supervisor and stood in front of the workers, everyone was taken aback. It's not every day you see a girl fresh out of middle school working alongside burly men. Sensing the atmosphere, I said, My name is Mary. Feel free to train me rigorously. No need for any special treatment. Everyone had a bewildered expression on their faces, like pigeons that had just eaten a pea shooter. It was a moment of realization for me. One man let out an incredibly loud shout, Kevin, you've only been here for a month, so you shouldn't be saying that then. The room filled with laughter, and it became the signal to start the day's work. Although I had asked not to be treated specially, all the workers were kind and helped me get used to the work quickly. One person who especially looked out for me was Kevin, who had raised his voice on my first day, saying, Leave it to me. Kevin, who is 3 years older than me, served as the site's mood maker. During busy times when tensions ran high, he always helped lighten the mood. He patiently taught me the basics of the job and always lent a hand during physically demanding tasks. I gradually found myself drawn to Kevin, who never neglected the people around him and always showed consideration. About half a year into my job, One day, Kevin was tasked with moving materials, and I ended up riding in the same vehicle with him. I had started to become curious about Kevin and felt excited throughout the entire car ride, unable to say anything. An awkward atmosphere filled the car. "Why did you join this company, Kevin?" Feeling the need to say something, I asked a trivial question. At that moment, Kevin decided to share something personal. "I wanted to become free sooner, you know." I was taken aback by the sudden heavy statement. "I'm sorry," I said, thinking I had asked something I shouldn't have. Kevin quickly returned to his usual cheerful self and said, "Mary, there's no reason for you to have such a gloomy expression. I'm confident that my judgment was correct." Hearing those words, I felt a deep admiration for Kevin. In the next moment, my true feelings slipped out. "Would you like to go out with me?" I didn't even know why those words came out of my mouth. Suddenly feeling embarrassed, I looked down. "Nice to see you," Kevin said when the car stopped at a red light. I lifted my head and looked at Kevin. He directed a kind gaze towards me. Shortly after we started dating, I learned the meaning of what Kevin had said in the car on the day of the material delivery. When he mentioned wanting to be free as soon as possible, I discovered that Kevin had a 2-year age difference with his brother Sam. Sam had been academically excellent since childhood with outstanding school grades. On the other hand, Kevin didn't have good grades, although they were still above average. But his parents didn't accept that. Kevin explained that he always felt uncomfortable being compared to Sam. That alone was difficult enough. But Kevin's parents poured all their love into Sam. Sam went to one of the top public middle schools in the county, while Kevin attended the local public middle school. During that time, all of their parents' attention seemed to be focused on Sam, leaving Kevin without any communication or support. When Kevin entered high school, he began thinking about moving away from his parents once he graduated. The day after his high school graduation, Kevin left home without revealing his destination. "I'm leaving this house starting tomorrow," Kevin said during dinner. His mother simply replied, "Is that so?" while his father remained silent. Sam, Kevin's brother, wasn't there because he had entered an extremely competitive public university. "We got married when I was 20 and Kevin was 24. We invited my family, colleagues from work, and close friends to the wedding. At Kevin's request, we didn't inform his family. I want to be genuinely blessed from the bottom of my heart," Kevin had said, and I understood that it was his true feeling, not just a show of strength. So I didn't argue. The following year, our first son Jack was born, and in the 3rd year of our marriage, our daughter Sarah was born. We were never wealthy, but being part of a smiling family made me happy. As far as I knew, Kevin was not in contact with his family at all. However, Kevin said that he would return to his parents' house next New Year. "Just be yourself," he said, but I knew it wouldn't be easy to act normally. I wondered what kind of expression I'd see from Kevin's parents and how Kevin would interact with them and Sam. Would he have to endure painful experiences like he did in high school again? I spent anxious days thinking about various things until we went back to his hometown. For Kevin, it had been 6 years since he last visited his home. Waiting to greet us were 2 children. "Mom, Dad, who are these people?" the older boy asked before running into the house. After a while, a woman with a neat appearance, around 50 years old with long hair, appeared. This was likely Kevin's mother. "Long time no see," Kevin greeted her. "It's been a while," she responded coldly. Her attitude made it clear that we were not welcomed. In the living room, Kevin's father and Sam's spouse were there. The conversation flowed fairly well, but it revolved around matters related to Sam, who worked at a city bank, his children's extracurricular activities, and their upcoming exams. It was a clear attempt to provoke us. Our 2 kids stuck close to my side, sensing the tension. Kevin's mother reappeared in the living room with a cheerful smile and handed a small envelope to Sam's children. Their faces lit up with joy, showing how much she doted on them. Then she turned her gaze towards us and said, "We will not give any New Year's gift to the children of a high school dropout's wife." Her words stung deeply. I clenched my fist firmly on my thigh, enduring it. Kevin had told me to endure whatever they said, and I was determined to follow his advice. My 2 children were also enduring in the same way. There was a brief moment of silence. Then Kevin spoke, "It's not a big deal. Meeting with you guys for the last time this year. We won't see each other again after this." His words were heavy, yet he spoke in a bright tone. They must have been surprised by Kevin's reaction. I had never expected this reaction. Kevin's parents and Sam just said, "Huh," and then froze. "Mary, is it about time for the CEO to arrive?" Kevin asked me. The clock read almost 5 minutes to 11. Yeah, that's right. They said they'd arrive around 11, I replied. During our conversation, Kevin's parents listened with blank expressions. Around 11:10, the doorbell rang. Kevin's mother answered it, and a voice said, "I'm Smith." With a curious expression, Kevin's mother headed towards the entrance. When she came back, she had a complex expression. Behind her was the CEO of our company, standing with a calm demeanor. "I'm sorry for the unexpected visit during the New Year holiday," the CEO began. "Kevin from my family said today would be a good day to talk." Kevin's parents and Sam had expressions of confusion. "Mr. Smith, we finished our discussion. I'll take on the matter of adoption," Kevin spoke clearly, ensuring his parents and Sam understood. The sudden mention of adoption left Kevin's parents even more taken aback. "Did you really explain the situation properly? You have a habit of making judgments based on your own assumptions from time to time," the CEO said, demonstrating his understanding of Kevin's personality. "My parents have been talking as if we weren't there at all. Their attitude clearly indicates how they feel about us," Kevin said. The CEO turned to Kevin's parents, straightened his posture, and said, "I am considering adopting Kevin, and I have his consent for it. However, I believe it's essential to have a proper discussion with both of you. That's why I came to pay my respects today." While the CEO explained, Kevin's parents and Sam remained silent. They probably couldn't say anything because they were hearing about how great a person Kevin is and how dedicated he is in everything he does. The CEO had broached the topic of adoption about 6 months ago. He and his wife didn't have any children and wanted Kevin to eventually take over the company. "I'm not cut out for that," Kevin initially declined, but the CEO smiled and said, "Can you really say something like that? Everyone except you supported the idea of adopting Kevin into the family." Upon hearing those words, Kevin broke down in tears. "When I realized how many people truly saw and accepted him, I felt incredibly blessed." When the CEO told me about Kevin's adoption proposal, Kevin, sitting next to me, explained it with a hint of embarrassment. Kevin gave us an experience as if he were our own child. He fulfilled the dream of walking down the aisle with a bride's hand I thought would never be mine, the CEO said, looking at me. He was probably referring to how he went with me to Kevin's place instead of my father at our wedding. Even after the CEO's explanation about the adoption, Kevin's parents said nothing. "Goodbye," Kevin said, likely a final farewell to his parents and Sam. "I beg your pardon," the CEO added. We got up and headed to the front door. For some reason, everyone saw us off. Kevin's parents and Sam both had faces like they couldn't accept reality, as if they had been caught by a fox. "Wow, that's a cool car," Sam's children exclaimed in amazement as they saw the CEO's car. Our family got into the car, and I rolled down the window to give a nod. Kevin's parents and Sam's group had blank, ashen faces. As the car started moving, Kevin said, "Dad, I'm counting on you from now on." "I'd appreciate you," I added. Then our two children, though a bit hesitant, spoke in clear voices, "Grandpa, I'm counting on you."